behind every word. Before a single word escapes your lips, before a sentence is even formed in your mind, something far more powerful is already communicating for you. You walk into a room, and within seconds, people form opinions, not based on what you said, but on what you showed. The way you carry yourself, the way your eyes scan the room, the rhythm of your breathing. This is where communication truly begins. Long before language, we had presence. And still, to this day, presence speaks louder than words. Think of someone who walks into a meeting and doesn't even have to say a word, yet everyone notices them. Not because they're loud, but because they're centered, grounded. They radiate something calm, clear, and confident. That's what we're here to master. That silent language, the one that exists under every syllable. You don't need to be the most educated person in the room. You don't need the fanciest vocabulary. What you need is alignment. Alignment between your body, your tone, and your intention. Because if your words say one thing, but your energy says something else, people will always believe the energy. That's human psychology. We trust what we feel before we trust what we hear. So, if you walk into a conversation nervous and unsure, it doesn't matter how perfectly you phrase your ideas. People will feel that uncertainty. And once they feel it, their brain starts searching for confirmation, hesitation in your tone, fidgeting in your hands, lack of eye contact. One by one, their subconscious picks up on all of it, not to judge you, but to protect itself. It needs to decide quickly. Should I listen to this person, or should I tune them out? This is the invisible test we all face. Every room you enter, every call you join, every one-on-one interaction, it starts with perception. And perception is not formed by your words. It's formed by your presence. This is why some people with average ideas get more attention than those with brilliant ideas. Not because the world is unfair, but because those people command attention before they even speak. They understand that the way you enter a space matters just as much as the way you speak within it. Let's pause for a second and bring this closer to home. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who spoke softly, but you couldn't stop listening? They weren't flashy, they weren't even particularly animated, but something about them made you trust them, made you lean in, made you want to hear more. That's not luck. That's not natural charisma. That's someone who knows how to manage their energy. They speak from the chest, not the throat. They hold silence with comfort, not anxiety. They look you in the eye, not to dominate, but to connect. Every movement is intentional. Every pause is purposeful. They don't just talk, they communicate. That's the power of presence. And it's not just about speaking to crowds. It's about your daily life. When you walk into a room, when you enter a negotiation, when you're being interviewed, when you're comforting a friend. In every setting, how you carry yourself shapes how your words land. Here's the truth most people don't understand. People don't remember what you said as much as how you made them feel while you said it. And how you make them feel comes from your tone, your face, your stillness, or your restlessness. Every subtle cue sends a message. Are you confident? Are you anxious? Are you centered? Are you pretending? Most people think communication is all about articulation, but that's the final layer. The first layer, the one people absorb instantly, is nonverbal. And that nonverbal layer starts before you even say hello. So how do you start developing this silent power? You begin by slowing down. You stop rushing your words. You stop over-explaining. You start pausing intentionally, not because you're lost, but because you're present. People who rush their words give away their anxiety. People who can sit in a pause without rushing to fill the silence, they send a different message. I'm comfortable here. I'm in control of myself. And when you're in control of yourself, people feel safe around you. That's influence. Because people don't listen to those who talk the most. They listen to those who feel the most in control of themselves. It's why the greatest communicators have this calmness. A rhythm that feels like leadership. A voice that doesn't shout, but still echoes. Their message doesn't need volume. It has weight. Now, here's the deeper layer most people never reach. Your internal state is always leaking out. If you're angry, it comes out even if you smile. If you're scared, people feel it, even if your voice sounds steady. If you're desperate to prove something, that desperation will be louder than your words. So instead of just learning how to talk, you need to learn how to be grounded before speaking, how to breathe deeper before responding, how to feel secure in yourself so that your message carries that same security. You can't fake this for long. The body reveals the truth. The nervous system always exposes you. So the only real answer is to develop genuine control, inner calm, true confidence, and a mind that isn't racing while you speak. Here's how you begin. In your next conversation, don't just focus on what to say. Focus on how you're breathing, how fast you're speaking, how often you're filling silence with filler words. Whether you're waiting to reply or actually listening, this awareness will feel strange at first, like trying to walk while watching your own feet. But over time, it becomes natural. And when it does, you start to gain power. Because now, you're not just saying words, you're delivering them. Not from your throat, but from your being. And that delivery changes everything. Let others rush. Let them overtalk. Let them drown in their own noise. You'll become the one who speaks with stillness. You'll become the one who says more in 5 calm words than others do in 50. Because you've understood something they haven't. The most powerful voice in the room isn't the loudest. It's the most aligned. And that's where we begin. Chapter 2. Listening is where power begins. Great speakers have one thing in common. They are great listeners first. Most people hear this and ignore it because listening doesn't sound glamorous. It doesn't feel like a power move. It's quiet. It's passive. It doesn't make you stand out, but that's exactly where its strength lies. Listening is where real communication begins. It's where trust is born, where connection is formed, and where influence silently grows. You want to speak smart? Then first, you need to listen smart, not pretend listening, not passive hearing, not waiting for your turn to talk. Real listening. The kind where you put your ego aside, where you're not just absorbing words, you're watching tone, noticing pauses, hearing what's not being said. That kind of listening, it's rare. And that's what makes it powerful. When you truly listen to someone, something shifts in them. They feel seen, heard, understood. And in a world full of noise and distraction, that's a rare gift. Most people are dying to be heard, but constantly feel ignored. You change that. You become the person who actually gets them. And the moment someone feels understood, they trust you. That trust, that's the foundation of every great conversation, negotiation, relationship, or speech. Most people don't even realize when they've lost a room. They're so busy preparing the next sentence, they miss the signals, the eyes drifting, the tension rising, the subtle resistance. All of it could have been caught if they were truly listening. But they weren't. They were too focused on speaking. But you'll be different. You'll master the art of staying silent just long enough to hear what people actually mean, not just what they say. Because here's the truth. People don't always say what they mean, but they always reveal it if you're listening closely enough. It's in the hesitation before they answer. It's in the forced smile after a compliment. It's in the quiet sigh between words. It's in the way they change the topic when something hits a nerve. This is where emotional intelligence meets communication. And when you develop this kind of listening, not just to words, but to feelings, you start understanding people on a deeper level than they understand themselves. And that gives you a unique kind of power, a gentle kind, a silent kind, a kind that allows you to speak exactly what someone needs to hear because you've been listening long enough to know what they've never said out loud. Let's make it practical. In your next conversation, don't rush. Slow down your response time by just 2 seconds. Let the person fully finish. Pause. Then answer. You'll be shocked how much more people open up in that tiny space of silence. You'll be surprised how much you start to see when you're not jumping in to reply. And when you do reply, your words hit harder. Because they're not just reactive, they're reflective. They show you were present, engaged, connected, and that creates impact. Here's something else most communicators miss. When you become a great listener, your questions become sharper. Because you're not asking from a script, you're asking from understanding. And powerful questions move people more than powerful statements ever can. But you can't get there without listening first. You also can't fake this. People know when you're waiting to talk. People know when you're only half present. Their subconscious picks it up instantly, and once they feel that disconnect, their walls go up. But when you're truly locked in, when your body language is open, your eyes are steady, your phone is away, your responses are thoughtful, people lean in. People open up. People respect you because you've given them the one thing they rarely get: attention. And attention is the currency of influence. It doesn't matter if you're in a business meeting, a relationship, or a one-minute conversation in an elevator. If you can make someone feel heard, you've already made an impression. And here's the twist. When people feel heard by you, they're more likely to listen to you when it's your turn to speak. That's the irony. You earn the right to speak by being the one who listens first. Not the one who dominates the space, not the one who talks over others, not the one who memorizes clever phrases, but the one who listens with intention, the one who makes people feel, wow, you actually get me. That's how you start to speak smart. Not by having the perfect vocabulary, but by understanding the psychology behind what makes people open their ears in the first place. And that always begins with how well you listen. You'll start to notice something strange when you do this consistently. People will walk away from conversations with you and say things like, "You're so easy to talk to. I don't know why, but I feel like I can trust you. I've never told anyone that before." Not because you said anything genius, but because you listened like it mattered. And it does matter. Because behind every strong voice is a strong ear. Behind every compelling speaker is a master observer. Behind every influential message is a mountain of moments where that speaker was just silent, watching, learning, absorbing. So take this chapter and don't just read it, practice it right now. Next conversation, next phone call, next time someone speaks, pause, be present. Hold back the urge to jump in, watch, feel. Let the silence breathe. And when it's your turn to speak, speak from that place of calm clarity, not pressure. Because now you're not just another person talking, you're someone who listens, and that's rare, and rare always commands attention. Chapter 3. Speak to influence, not to impress. There's a subtle difference between someone who speaks to impress and someone who speaks to influence. On the surface, both can sound articulate, both can sound confident, both might use polished words and persuasive tone. But underneath it all, their intentions are completely different, and people feel it. When you speak to impress, you focus on yourself, how you sound, how smart you appear, how many people are nodding along. You chase approval, you perform. But when you speak to influence, you shift that focus. You're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about them, the person in front of you. You're aiming to move them, change them, reach them. That shift in intent is everything. People can sense when your communication is self-serving. They might smile politely. They might even compliment your delivery. But deep down, they won't trust it because it wasn't for them. It was about you. But the moment they feel your message is meant for them, not to boost your ego, but to connect, to serve, to elevate, that's when influence begins. This is where true communicators separate themselves. They stop using language as decoration and start using it as a bridge. When your goal is to influence, not manipulate, but truly influence, you begin to choose your words differently. You start to listen more. You frame your message based on the other person's world, not just your own. You learn their language, like their pain, their desires, and then you speak into that. You're not talking at them, you're talking to them. Big difference. Let's say you're in a meeting, pitching an idea. If you're trying to impress, you'll focus on sounding smart. Using technical terms, showing how much you know. But if you're trying to influence, you'll focus on what matters to them. You'll connect your idea to their problem. You'll simplify instead of complicate. You'll meet them where they are and then guide them somewhere better. Impressing people wins moments. Influencing people changes direction. And if you're here to become a smart speaker, not just in knowledge, but in strategy, then you must choose influence every time. Because here's the truth. No one cares how smart you sound if they don't feel like you care. Real influence requires emotional intelligence, the ability to read the moment, to sense when to slow down, when to push, when to hold back. It's not about dominating a conversation. It's about dancing with it, adjusting, shifting, staying alert to what's landing and what's falling flat. This level of awareness makes you dangerous in the best way. Because now you're not just another voice in the room. You're the one who knows how to move the room. And that's rare. Most people are stuck in performance mode. They think speaking well means using fancy words or sounding like a motivational speaker. But power isn't in polish. It's in precision, simplicity, relevance. The smartest communicators speak in a way that makes the listener feel smart. That's influence. You're not trying to shine. You're trying to spark something in them. And ironically, that's what makes you shine anyway. Now let's talk about tone. When you speak to impress, your tone often feels like it's pushing, fast, forceful, almost like you're trying to win something. But when you speak to influence, your tone pulls people in. It feels more spacious, calmer, steady. It invites instead of insists. It opens the door instead of kicking it in. There's nothing weak about that. In fact, it's the ultimate strength. Because when people feel invited, not pressured, they listen longer, deeper, with more openness. And that's when transformation happens. So how do you develop this? How do you shift from impressing to influencing? You start by checking your intent before every conversation. Ask yourself, not out loud, but internally, am I trying to prove something here? If the answer is yes, pause. Realign, because the need to prove comes from insecurity, from ego. But if your intent is to help, to guide, to connect, you'll speak differently. You'll become more present. You'll use fewer words, but they'll carry more weight. You'll stop worrying about how you look and start focusing on what they feel. This doesn't mean you stop being passionate or that you hold back your brilliance. No. You just aim your brilliance at the person in front of you, not back at yourself. That's how impact is made. That's how messages become memorable. And when you do this consistently, something powerful happens. People start seeking you out. They say things like, "What, you always say the right thing. You helped me think differently. I never saw it that way before." Not because you memorized scripts, but because you spoke from the right place with the right purpose. And when your purpose is to serve, you never run out of influence. You don't have to try so hard. You don't have to impress anyone. Your presence does that. Your message, aligned with empathy, speaks for itself. You'll stop trying to win conversations and start creating conversations where both people win. You'll stop performing and start connecting. You'll stop needing recognition because the impact will speak louder than applause. So next time you're about to speak in a room, on a stage, in a one-on-one, remember this. If your focus is on you, they'll feel it. If your focus is on them, they'll follow. The smartest speakers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who change the most minds with the fewest, most honest, well-placed words. Speak with purpose. Speak from service. Speak to influence. That's where your power lives. Chapter 4. Calm is the loudest voice in the room. True power doesn't need to shout. Real authority never rushes. And the most respected voice in any room isn't always the one that dominates. It's often the one that stays calm while everyone else is reacting. There's a quiet force behind a composed speaker, a weight in their tone, a rhythm in their silence. They speak without panic, respond without urgency, and carry themselves with a grounded energy that can't be faked. This is the communication style that earns trust, commands rooms, and disarms conflict, not by being aggressive, but by being unshakable. In a world that constantly pushes you to speak louder, react faster, and prove your worth through noise, calm becomes a superpower. People aren't just listening to your words. They're absorbing your emotional state. If your tone is frantic, they feel it. If your body is tense, they mirror it. And if your energy is scattered, your message won't land. Even if your words are perfect, calm is clarity. Calm is control. Calm is confidence in its purest form. Think of the last time you saw someone lose their temper in a discussion. They probably spoke with volume, with passion, maybe even with logic, but their message got lost. Not because they were wrong, but because they lost their center. And once that center is gone, you become reactive, not intentional. Now think of someone who remained grounded during pressure. Maybe it was in a debate, maybe in an argument, maybe in a crisis, but something about their voice made people stop and listen. They weren't flustered. They didn't raise their tone. They responded slowly, measured, calm. and that calm created impact. You can't fake this kind of composure. People know when you're pretending, but you can train it. You can build it. You can learn to control your internal environment so that no matter what's happening around you, your communication stays powerful. It starts with slowing down. Most people speak too fast, not because they're excited, but because they're anxious. They feel the need to fill space, to prove something, to keep the other person's attention. But when you're calm, you don't rush. You breathe between thoughts. You allow silence to live. You pause, not to hesitate, but to let your words land. This creates a natural gravity. People listen differently when there's space in your delivery. Their ears perk up, their minds engage. You give their brains time to digest, not just hear, and that makes you unforgettable. Now let's go deeper. Why do calm speakers feel more powerful? Because they're perceived as being in control, not just of the situation, but of themselves. And that self-control builds credibility. It tells people, this person can handle pressure. This person doesn't need approval. This person knows who they are. That's influence. You see, when you're reactive, when your voice shakes, when your pace speeds up, when your tone rises, you lose the upper hand. You lose the ability to guide the interaction because now you're no longer communicating with intention. You're just defending yourself. But when you're calm, even in disagreement, you remain strategic. You listen more. You speak with purpose. You don't respond to every jab. You let others exhaust themselves with noise while you stay rooted in clarity. And eventually, people notice the difference. They start looking to you when things get tense. They trust you more when emotions are high. They respect your voice, not because it's loud, but because it's measured. Now, this doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you process emotion before expressing it. You channel it, you filter it through intention. That's emotional maturity. That's leadership. That's power. Let's get practical. Before your next conversation, especially one where you might feel nervous, take a moment to regulate yourself. Breathe. Sit still. Feel your feet on the ground. Slow your inner world down. When you start to speak, lower your volume just slightly. Drop your shoulders. Make eye contact, but soften it. Speak slowly, not sluggishly, intentionally. Let your message unfold with patience. If you feel yourself speeding up, pause. Don't fill the space. Let the space work for you. Because here's the truth. The person who controls the pace controls the room. And when you set a calm pace, others follow. They mirror your tone. They adjust their rhythm. And slowly, without even knowing it, you become the anchor. This is how you shift the dynamic in your favor. Not through dominance, but through presence. Because presence doesn't require force. It requires stillness. And stillness is rare. People crave it, especially in a noisy, reactive world. So, if you want to speak smart, don't just focus on words. Master your tone, own your rhythm, protect your energy, let your calm become your signature. Because when you're calm, you think clearly. When you're calm, you make better choices. And when you're calm, your words don't just speak, they resonate. So next time the pressure rises, lower your tone. Next time you're tempted to react, pause instead. Next time someone raises their voice, soften yours. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Because you understand this simple truth. Calm is the loudest voice in the room. Chapter 5. Words that shape. Belief. Words are not just sounds. They are tools, instruments, sometimes even weapons. The way we use them can build bridges or burn them. Words can heal or hurt, lift or limit, empower or manipulate. But the most powerful use of words, the one that truly changes lives, is when they shape belief. Because belief is what drives behavior. People don't take action because you gave a perfect argument. They take action because something inside them shifted. And that shift rarely comes from logic alone. It comes from language that feels true. Language that gets past the brain and into the nervous system. Words that bypass the surface and plant themselves deep in someone's identity. That's when change happens. The smart speaker understands this. They don't just speak to be heard. They speak to be felt. And to do that, you must learn how belief works. Every person you speak to carries a set of internal beliefs, some empowering, some limiting. Those beliefs shape how they interpret the world, how they respond, how they hear you. Let's say someone believes, deep down, I'm not good enough. Now, if you speak to them with logic, explaining how capable they are, how much potential they have, they might nod along. They might even smile. But their inner belief? It'll reject it. Silently. Automatically. Because logic doesn't overwrite identity. To change how someone sees themselves, you must speak into their story, not just their mind. You must use language that resonates with how they already think, and then gently guide them somewhere new. This is where subtlety matters. You don't say you're wrong. You say, what if there's more? You don't say, you need to believe this. You say, have you ever felt this way? You create room, space, possibility. You shape belief by showing, not forcing, a new way to see things. And when that's done well, the listener doesn't feel attacked. They feel seen, understood, invited. And when people feel safe, their mind opens, their ears open, their beliefs loosen, and that's when real influence begins. Let's go deeper. There are 3 kinds of words that shape belief. Identity words. These are words that speak to who someone is, not just what they do. When you say, you're the kind of person who always finds a way, you're not describing behavior. You're reinforcing identity. And identity drives everything. It becomes internalized. And when someone starts to see themselves differently, they begin to act differently. Future-oriented words. These speak to potential. Not in a fluffy motivational way, but in a grounded, vision-based way. You haven't seen your best work yet. There's more in you than they've ever noticed. These phrases light a spark. They point forward, and most people desperately need something to believe in beyond where they are now. Permission-based words. Sometimes people don't need advice. They need permission. It's okay to want more. You don't need to explain your dream to everyone. These words don't teach, they release. They give people emotional room to grow. And that's often more powerful than any argument. Now combine these types of words with timing, delivery, tone, and silence, and you have the full recipe for shaping belief. This isn't manipulation, this is precision. Because every time you speak, you're either reinforcing someone's current identity or opening the door to a new one. And if you're careless with your words, you might unintentionally reinforce limitations. Let's say you're giving feedback. If you say, you always mess this part up, that creates a belief. I'm someone who messes things up. But if you say, this part seems like it's still evolving for you, now you're speaking to growth, possibility, not failure. That's the subtle difference between communication and transformation. And you, as someone learning to speak smart, will learn to feel that difference, to adjust in real time, to sense how your words are landing, and to guide the message toward belief instead of just information. Because people forget what they heard, but they remember what they started to believe after hearing you. So before you speak, ask yourself, what belief do I want to reinforce with this sentence? Am I anchoring someone deeper in their fear or showing them a way forward? This level of self-awareness in communication is what separates smart from average. Now, let's talk about self-talk for a moment, because the person you speak to the most is yourself. The words you use internally shape your own beliefs. Every "I can't," every "I'm not ready," every "what if I fail," these become the architecture of your identity. So it's not just about how you speak to others, it's about how you speak to you. Replace "I'm stuck" with "I'm still figuring it out." Replace "I'm not that good" with "I'm getting better every time." Replace "I don't know what I'm doing" with "I'm learning fast." These subtle shifts don't deny reality. They reshape your relationship with reality. And over time, those words become beliefs. And those beliefs drive everything, from your tone, your posture, your confidence, your presence. So when you master language, not just for others, but for yourself, you become someone who speaks belief into rooms that forgot what belief feels like. You become someone who can walk into tension and create space. You become someone whose words carry weight, not just sound. Because you've trained yourself to speak from truth, not performance. And people feel that. They may not always remember the exact words, but they'll remember the way you made them feel about themselves. And that memory, that becomes the new seed of belief, planted by your words, rooted in their mind, growing into new behavior, new decisions, and maybe, if the moment was right, a new version of them. That's the power you hold. So use it wisely, use it gently, use it with intention. Speak words that build, speak words that break old patterns, speak words that shape new belief, quietly, carefully, consistently. Because that's how you don't just speak smart, you speak with soul. Chapter 6. Presence speaks before you do. Before you say a single word, the room has already read you. They've scanned your body language, felt your pace, noted your eye contact or lack of it, absorbed your tension or your calm. And without realizing it, they've already formed an impression. That impression, it decides whether your words will land or bounce off the surface. This is what few people understand. Your presence speaks first. Long before the first syllable leaves your mouth, people have already decided what kind of speaker you are, what kind of person you are, and more importantly, whether they trust you, respect you, and are open to being influenced by you. You can't control other people's minds, but you can control your presence. Let's define presence, not the fake kind. Not the overly animated, performative version you sometimes see on stage. Real presence is calm, grounded, undeniable. It's when someone enters the room and people feel something shift, not because of noise, but because of weight. Presence is the energy you carry when you've done your inner work. It's what happens when you don't need to prove anything. You're not in the room to take, you're there to give. You're not begging for attention, you already have your own. You're not scattered, you're centered. And in a world full of noise, presence becomes rare and unforgettable. Now here's the truth. Presence is not about charisma. It's about congruence. When your internal state aligns with your external message, people believe you. Even if they don't agree with you, they feel you. But if your voice says confidence and your eyes say fear, people feel that conflict and they pull back. If your words say authority, but your body shows hesitation, people feel the gap, and they stop listening. Your presence is your credibility. It's not what you wear. It's not how tall you stand. It's not even your title. It's how aligned you are with yourself. Are you walking into the room fully aware of your intent? Are you tuned in to the energy of the space? Are you grounded in your purpose? Because if you're scattered, your voice will reflect it. If you're pretending, your body will expose it. But if you're real, calm, honest, still, your presence will carry power before a word is spoken. Let's talk about some of the components of presence. Stillness. People who move frantically, touch their face, shift weight constantly, they radiate uncertainty. But someone who's still, who knows when to be silent, who holds space instead of rushing to fill it, that person feels like a leader. Stillness doesn't mean stiff, it means intentional. Breath. Your breath is the rhythm of your presence. If it's shallow and fast, your words will feel rushed. If it's deep and slow, your tone will be grounded. Great communicators breathe from the diaphragm. Their voices are anchored, and listeners can feel the difference. Focus. When you're speaking to someone, are you truly with them? Or are you half present, waiting for your turn, thinking about something else? Presence is focus in motion. It's the ability to give someone the full weight of your attention, and that alone builds trust faster than any words can. Intent. Why are you speaking? To serve? To help? To share something meaningful? Or to gain approval? To impress? People can feel your intent, even if they can't name it. And if your intent is pure, your presence becomes magnetic. Now here's where it gets deep. Presence isn't something you turn on. It's something you build, and it's built in silence, in how you speak to yourself when no one's around, in how you carry yourself when there's no audience, in how you prepare before the spotlight hits. Because when you do the internal work, the external becomes effortless. You walk into the room and don't need to convince people to listen. They just do. Not because of your voice, but because of your energy. You become the kind of person people feel before they understand. And that feeling, that's what creates influence. So, how do you practice this? Start with small moments. Walk into your home tonight, don't say a word. Just notice what your presence feels like. Before your next phone call, pause, breathe. Align your intention. When someone else is speaking, give them your eyes, your stillness, your full self. These seem like small things, but they shift the entire conversation. And when it's your turn to speak, you'll notice the difference. Your tone will be deeper. Your words will be clearer. Your pauses will be more meaningful. You won't be just speaking, you'll be leading the room because your presence already prepared the space for your message to land. And here's the most powerful part of all. People will remember your presence longer than your words. They may forget your message. They may not recall every sentence, but they'll remember how it felt to be around you. They'll remember the calm you carried, the focus you gave them, the trust they felt, often before you even opened your mouth. So build that presence, not just for performance, but for connection. Because when your presence speaks before you do, your message doesn't need to shout. It simply arrives, and it stays. Chapter 7. Emotion moves. People, not information. You can have all the data, all the logic, all the structured, well-crafted arguments in the world. But if there's no emotion in your message, no heart, no feeling, people won't move. They may nod, they may even agree, but they won't act, they won't remember, and they definitely won't be changed. Because people don't respond to information. They respond to how that information makes them feel. This is one of the greatest truths in communication, and it's the one most people miss. They think that to speak smart is to sound smart, to prove they know more, to stack statistics, to win the debate with facts. But the smartest speakers aren't the ones who inform the most. They're the ones who move the most hearts. And that movement happens through emotion. When a message touches someone deeply, it becomes more than a thought. It becomes an experience. And experiences get stored in memory far longer than facts ever do. Now, don't get this wrong. Information matters, logic matters, structure matters, but they are the frame, not the feeling. The feeling is what makes someone say, "That hit me. I needed to hear that. I don't know why, but I feel different now." And if you want to master powerful communication, you must learn how to weave emotion into your words, gently, genuinely, purposefully. Let's get something clear. Emotional communication isn't about crying, yelling, or oversharing. It's not about being dramatic. It's about being real. When you speak from a place of truth, when you share from your own experience, not to impress, but to connect, people feel that. They lean in, they soften, they start to trust. Because emotion is the bridge that makes your message human. Most people are numb. They scroll all day. They're overinformed, underinspired. What cuts through that numbness? Emotion, not volume, not speed, not perfect diction, but a sentence that feels like a mirror, a pause that feels like a breath they've needed, a voice that sounds like someone who understands. Let's say you're speaking about discipline. You could say, "Discipline is important for success." Sure, that's true. But what if you said, "I've had mornings where getting out of bed felt like a battle. No motivation, no energy. Just the quiet whisper reminding me, do it anyway. Not for applause, not for speed, just so I don't break the promise I made to myself." That's emotion. That's experience. That's the kind of message that moves people because they feel it, they recognize themselves in it, and that recognition creates trust. Here's a powerful truth. People don't believe you when they trust your words. They believe you when they feel you've been where they are. You don't always need to tell your whole story, but you need to speak from it. Even if you're delivering a presentation on a dry topic, find the human layer, the moment it became personal, the fear that was present, the risk that was real, the breakthrough that mattered, because that's the layer that moves people. This applies to leadership too. People don't follow leaders because of their titles. They follow leaders who make them feel something. Safe, strong, seen. And how does that happen? Through language that connects. Let's talk tone. Emotion lives in tone, not just in words. You can say thank you 100 ways. Cold, flat, warm, deep, grateful, indifferent. The words don't change, but the feeling does. And that's what people actually hear. So before you speak, check yourself. Am I feeling what I'm about to say? Because if you don't feel it, they won't either. But when your tone carries honesty, when your pauses feel human, when your pace respects the moment, people listen longer, and they remember longer too. Let's talk storytelling. One of the best ways to bring emotion into your message is through story. Not just dramatic, big stories. Even small moments matter. A time you failed, a quiet decision you made, a doubt you overcame. These things don't just fill space. They create connection. And connection is the emotional glue that holds your message in place. So don't skip the story. Don't race past the feeling. Let people sit in the moment with you. That's what creates resonance. Because facts reach the mind, but stories reach the soul. And the soul is what decides what to believe, what to follow, what to remember. If you're worried about sounding too emotional, don't be. Real emotion isn't weakness. It's strength in its most human form. It takes courage to speak from the heart. It takes presence to stay with it. It takes discipline to do it consistently. But if you do, your message will land in places no chart, no bullet point, no clever phrase ever could. Because now you're not just communicating, you're connecting, you're making people feel again. And in a world that's forgotten how to feel, that's rare. That's power. That's smart. So next time you speak, don't just try to say the right thing. Try to say the real thing, the honest thing, the human thing, because that's what echoes long after the room goes quiet. Chapter 8. True confidence speaks without noise. You can always tell when someone is trying too hard to look confident. They talk fast. Their words are sharp, but their energy feels off. They use big statements, bold language, often even humor or dominance, but somehow something doesn't sit right. It feels hollow, forced, because real confidence doesn't shout. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need to. Real confidence is quiet, steady, unshaken. And when it enters a room, it doesn't ask for space. It owns it by simply being. You don't need to tell the world you're confident when you are confident. You don't need applause, agreement, or acknowledgement. You're centered in who you are, and that radiates louder than any speech. This chapter is about that kind of confidence, not the kind built from compliments or titles, but the kind that's earned alone through trial, repetition, and quiet belief. The kind of confidence that speaks without trying. Let's first be honest. Most people fake confidence because they think that's what they're supposed to do. The modern world rewards loud. The one who takes up the most space. The one who says the most in the least amount of time. The one who appears sure even when they're not. But those who truly influence others, those whose voices stay with you long after they've left the room, they don't rush. They don't overcompensate. They don't talk over you. They allow space. They're not afraid of silence. They're not afraid to say, I don't know when they don't. They're not afraid to change their opinion when new truth appears. That's real strength. Because confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the ability to keep speaking with integrity, even when doubt visits. It's trusting your message more than your momentary fear. And that trust doesn't come from practicing lines. It comes from practicing honesty. Let's go deeper. Where does this kind of confidence come from? It comes from alignment. When your words match your values, when your tone matches your truth, when your intent matches your message, then there's no internal conflict. You're not saying one thing while fearing another. You're not putting on a front. You're in sync. And people feel that. They trust that. Confidence is not volume, it's alignment. The most powerful speakers in the world aren't just articulate, they are congruent. Their message lives in their body. It lives in their eyes. It shows up in how they walk, how they breathe, how they listen. They've practiced being honest so long, it no longer scares them. That's why they sound different, because they are different. Now let's talk about what kills confidence: comparison. The more you compare yourself to others, the more your words start to wobble. Your voice tries to match someone else's pace. Your message starts copying someone else's formula. You lose your edge. You lose your authenticity. Confidence can't grow in imitation. it only grows in ownership. The moment you stop measuring your success by someone else's standards, you begin to find your own rhythm, your own voice, your own power. And the more you stay in that lane, the deeper your confidence becomes. You won't need a big audience. You won't need viral reactions. You'll just know what you're saying matters because you've lived it, felt it, earned it, and that energy speaks before you do. Let's also address body language. Confident speakers don't just sound calm, they look calm. Their shoulders are relaxed. Their breathing is low and even. Their hands move intentionally, not erratically. Their eyes meet yours, not to dominate, but to connect. All of these things happen naturally when your message isn't just memorized, but believed. The body doesn't lie. So if your voice and posture are off, don't fix the surface. Go deeper. Ask, do I really believe what I'm saying? Do I live by it? Do I trust this message, even if no one claps? When the answer becomes yes, you won't need a script to sound confident. You'll simply be confident because now your speaking is not performance. It's expression. It's truth in motion. Now here's the final truth. You don't have to feel confident to sound confident. Confidence isn't always a feeling. It's often a decision. You decide to show up anyway. You decide to speak slowly, even if your hands shake. You decide to ground your energy, even if your heart races. And the more you choose that decision, the more natural it becomes. Confidence grows with action, not just affirmation. You can read every book, watch every speaker, listen to every podcast. But until you speak, even when you're scared, it won't grow. But every time you do, every time you speak with calm, honest energy, every time you align what you say with what you know, your voice becomes clearer, your posture becomes stronger, and eventually you don't fake confidence, you become it. Not because the world said you were enough, but because you stopped waiting for the world to say it. You said it to yourself through your actions. So next time you speak, don't try to prove anything. Don't try to impress. Just be honest. Be present, be slow, be steady. Let your voice reflect who you've already become. Let your silence speak louder than your noise. Because that's what people remember. Not how loud you were, but how true you sounded. And in that truth, real confidence lives. Chapter 9. Influence without pressure. The art of subtle persuasion. The best speakers in the world don't try to convince you. They don't push. They don't pressure. They don't plead. They lead. And they do it subtly, quietly, gently, without ever making you feel like you're being led. That's the real art of persuasion. Not manipulation, not domination, not shouting until someone agrees, but communicating in such a way that someone feels the truth of what you're saying, even before they've fully understood it. This chapter is about that rare ability, the ability to move people without force, to shift perspectives without a fight, to create agreement without demand. It starts with understanding something most people overlook. People don't change because you said the right thing. People change when they feel safe enough to let go of their old way of seeing things. And that safety comes through subtle communication. The kind that respects, not pressures. The kind that listens, not preaches. The kind that makes people feel seen, not shamed. Let's break it down. There are two types of speakers. The one who needs to be right. The one who invites you to explore. The first tries to win. The second tries to understand. And in that simple difference lies all the power. People resist being convinced. They resist being told what to think. But they love discovering truth for themselves. Your job as a smart communicator is not to impose, it's to reveal, to guide, to ask without asking, to suggest without controlling. Because when people arrive at a conclusion themselves, it becomes theirs. And people defend what they own. Let's take an example. A speaker stands up and says, "You need to stop wasting your time on distractions. You're being lazy." What happens? Most people shut down. They may hear the message, but they won't receive it. Now, consider a different approach. I used to check my phone 100 times a day. Not because I didn't have goals, but because I was afraid to sit in silence. I realized it wasn't time I was lacking, it was courage. The courage to focus. Same message, but completely different energy. One feels like an attack, the other feels like a mirror. And we don't fight with mirrors. We look into them. This is the art of subtle persuasion. It's rooted in empathy, not ego, in understanding, not dominance, in shared experience, not superiority. The moment you start trying to look smarter than your audience, you lose them. But when you meet them where they are, when you speak to their struggle, not their shame, they follow you. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Let's talk about voice. Persuasive speakers don't just use words. They use tone as a tool. There's softness in their voice. Not weakness, softness. A kind of steadiness that says, I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to offer something. And that offering tone, calm, grounded, warm, creates trust. Because persuasion doesn't begin with logic. It begins with receptivity. If someone's heart is closed, their mind won't open. So before you deliver your message, ask, have I made this person feel safe? Safe to listen, safe to disagree, safe to be vulnerable. That safety creates space. And in that space, transformation becomes possible. Let's also talk about silence. One of the most underused persuasive tools is the pause. Not every silence is awkward. Some silences are sacred. They give people room to process, to feel, to think. A well-placed pause does more than 100 clever phrases. It shows confidence. It shows you're not rushing. It shows you trust your message enough to let it breathe. That's subtle power. Now, let's go even deeper. True persuasion happens when you stop focusing on the outcome and start focusing on the connection. When you speak with the genuine intent to serve, not to convert. When you value the person more than the point. Then your words start to land differently. They're not darts, they're seeds. And seeds don't force themselves into the ground. They fall gently, and they grow quietly. Your job is not to control the growth. Your job is to plant truth with care. And truth, when planted with care, grows into understanding. That's persuasion. That's the real influence. You don't need flashy techniques. You don't need linguistic tricks. You don't need to dominate the debate. You just need to care, to really care, to care enough to listen deeply, to speak slowly, to stay patient. Because when your presence says you're safe here and your voice says, I've been there too, and your message says, there's another way, people follow. Not out of pressure, but out of trust. That's how movements begin. That's how minds shift. That's how legacies are built. Not by overpowering, but by understanding deeply. And expressing that understanding in a way that feels real, soft, and safe. So next time you speak, don't aim to sound right. Aim to sound real. Don't aim to dominate the room. Aim to open it. Don't aim to convert everyone. Aim to reach someone gently, deeply, honestly. Because one person moved with subtlety is worth more than 1,000 who clapped out of pressure. And that one person, they'll remember you. Not for what you proved, but for what you helped them see about themselves. That's the true art of powerful communication. Chapter 10. Presence speaks louder than words. Some speakers have the perfect words. They know their material. They've rehearsed their tone. They say all the right things. But still, something's missing. Something you can't quite put your finger on. And then there are others who maybe aren't as polished, maybe don't speak with textbook perfection, but when they speak, you feel something. You lean in. You remember. What makes the difference? Presence. Not performance, not presentation, not pronunciation. Presence. It's the energy you bring, the stillness in your eyes, the intention in your words, the calmness in your pauses. Presence is the unspoken language behind every sentence. It's what turns a message into a moment. Most people think communication is all about talking, but the truth is, it's about showing up fully, being here, right here, with no mental tab open. No silent judgment running in the background. No agenda to impress. Just here to connect. Presence isn't about trying hard. It's about being real. When you're present, your audience feels safe. They feel seen. They feel like you're not just speaking to them, you're speaking with them. And that subtle difference changes everything. Let's break this down. Presence begins with listening. Yes, even when you're the one speaking. True speakers listen while they talk. They listen to the moment, to the breath of the room, to the silence between reactions. They're not just pushing content. They're receiving energy moment by moment. A speaker without presence is like a singer singing offbeat. They're technically fine, but rhythmically disconnected. But when you're present, you move with the room. You pause when needed. You shift tone naturally. You hold silence without fear. Because you're not stuck in your head. You're with the people in front of you. Presence builds trust instantly. People don't trust speakers who sound like robots, too perfect, too rehearsed, too distant. They trust speakers who feel human, and humanity comes through presence. When you're grounded in the moment, your eyes soften, your body relaxes, your tone becomes honest, and that honesty builds trust. It tells your audience, I'm not here to perform, I'm here to connect, and connection creates safety, and safety creates openness, and openness creates impact. Presence calms the nervous system. If you've ever been nervous while speaking, you know the feeling. Shaky hands, rapid heart, overthinking every word. That's because your mind has left the moment. You're not in the room, you're in your head. But the antidote is simple. Return to presence. Breathe. Feel your feet. Hear the sound of your voice. Feel the emotion behind your message. When you come back to now, your body follows. You calm, you steady, you become magnetic. Because calm presence is irresistible. People want to follow someone who's fully here. Not distracted. Not distant. Not doubtful. Here. Now. Presence makes every word count. You can say the same sentence with and without presence, and the impact will be completely different. Without presence, your words sound like a script. With presence, they sound like truth. People don't respond to information. They respond to intention. And intention lives inside presence. When you say, I believe in you, but you're distracted, people hear noise. But when you say it slowly, grounded, eyes steady, people feel it. And that feeling changes lives. Presence makes silence powerful. Most speakers fear silence. They rush to fill every gap. But presence embraces silence. Because it knows sometimes the pause is louder than the point. Presence trusts the moment. It doesn't rush to prove. It doesn't panic in stillness. It knows real power doesn't need to push. It just is. And in that being, people shift. They drop their guard. They breathe with you. They receive you, not just your words. That's presence. Let's take an example. You say, you matter. If you rush it, it feels generic. But if you say it slowly, with breath, with eye contact, with sincerity, you matter. It lands, it enters, it stays. That's not technique, that's presence. Presence is built in private. You can't fake presence. It's not something you add before a speech. It's something you live. It's how you speak to yourself, how you breathe when no one's watching, how you pause before reacting. Presence is built in the quiet moments, when you slow down, when you listen deeper, when you choose truth over performance. The more present you are with yourself, the more present you'll be with others. And that presence doesn't need a stage. It transforms every room you walk into, every conversation you have, every message you share. Presence makes you irreplaceable. In a world full of content creators, only a few are truly remembered. Not because they had better scripts, but because their presence was felt, because they showed up fully, because their energy stayed in the room long after they left. Because when they spoke, you believed them, not just with your mind, with your body, with your heart, with your soul. And belief is what changes lives. Belief is what turns messages into movements. Presence is the seed of that belief. So how do you grow it? You stop rushing. You start breathing. You ground yourself before every word. You remember, it's not about being impressive. It's about being here, right now, with them, fully. Chapter 11. Speak to be felt, not just heard. There's a kind of speaking that informs. There's a kind that entertains. And then there's the kind that moves you. The words don't just pass through your ears. They echo inside you. They stay. They change something. That's the kind of speech we all remember. And that kind of speech isn't built on fancy vocabulary. It's built on depth. Not external complexity, but internal clarity. It's not about sounding smart. It's about sounding true. And truth, when spoken with clarity, calm, and compassion, always lands. But this kind of depth doesn't come automatically. It comes from practice, from awareness, from slowing down and asking yourself not just, what am I saying, but what do I want them to feel? That's where we begin this chapter. Because communication is not just the transfer of words, it's the transfer of emotion. And emotion requires depth. Let's unpack what that means. Depth begins with intention. Every time you speak, you're doing more than exchanging words. You're revealing who you are. Your tone, your pace, your choice of words, even your pauses, they all carry emotional weight. If you speak from frustration, it shows. If you speak from care, it shows. If you speak from fear, it always shows. But when you speak from grounded intention, when you center yourself before you open your mouth, the impact multiplies. Before you speak, ask yourself silently, what's my true reason for saying this? Do I want to help, connect, guide, or am I just trying to be right? When your intention is pure, your words gain weight. They stop being just sentences. They become experiences. Use simplicity to create impact. Most people think depth means complexity, long sentences, abstract ideas, intellectual language. But depth is the opposite. Depth is clarity. The kind of clarity that cuts through noise. The kind of clarity that allows even a child to understand a big truth. The simpler your words, the more deeply they enter. Think of the most powerful quotes you know. They're usually short, but they hit hard. Why? Because depth lives in simplicity, not in clutter. So stop trying to sound impressive. Try to sound honest. Let your language breathe. Let it land. Don't dress up your thoughts. Deliver them clean. Let them stand naked and whole. That's where the power is. Story is the shortcut to the heart. Nothing builds depth like a well-told story. Facts speak to the mind. Stories speak to the soul. When you tell a personal story, something real, vulnerable, imperfect, you invite people in. You stop being a speaker. You become a human. And humans connect with humans, not with data. You can talk about resilience abstractly, or you can share the time you broke down in your car because life got too heavy and how you picked yourself up the next morning. That story doesn't need to be polished. It just needs to be real. And real stories always resonate. If you want to be remembered, be willing to be seen. If you want to be felt, be willing to feel. Because people don't respond to performance. They respond to presence, plus vulnerability. Speak with rhythm, not just logic. Deep communication flows. It has rhythm. Like music, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes silent. When you speak with rhythm, people don't just hear you, they ride your message. They follow the emotional wave, and that wave builds connection. Think of great orators, not just what they said, but how they said it. Their voice danced between tension and release. They didn't rush, they respected timing. They allowed each idea to breathe before moving to the next. This rhythm is not a technique. It's a listening skill. You feel the audience. You sense when to pause. You let the room digest. And then you go again, building a pulse between you and them. That pulse is what creates emotional connection. And once connected, your message no longer floats above. It sinks in. Speak from the body, not just the brain. You can write a speech in your head, but you speak best when you feel it in your body. That means grounding. That means aligning your breath. That means allowing your emotions to be felt as you speak. When you do that, your voice changes. It drops from the throat to the chest. It slows. It warms. It connects. People can always tell when you're speaking about something versus speaking from something. And that from is where the power lives. Speak from your body, from your belly, from your truth. Let your truth become breath. And then words. That's how you make people feel. That's how you go deep. Avoid the mask of performance. When you try to sound correct, you lose depth. When you try to sound like someone else, you become shallow. True communication is about alignment, not performance. So remove the mask. Speak how you speak. Be raw. Be slow. Be awkward even. But be real. Because real is rare, and rare is powerful. And power doesn't always come from being polished. Sometimes it comes from being painfully honest, from showing the cracks in your voice, from admitting, I don't have all the answers, but I care. That line, said from the heart, carries more weight than 1,000 rehearsed phrases. People don't remember the best speech. They remember the truest one, the one that touched them. Know when to stop talking. Depth also means restraint. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop. Let your last sentence ring. Let the silence speak. Don't chase after more words. Trust what you've already said. If it came from truth, it's enough. Let it land. Let it breathe. Let them sit with it. And in that stillness, they'll feel it. Chapter 12. Be the message. When your life speaks louder than your words. There comes a point in the journey of powerful communication where words start to take a back seat. Not because they're no longer important, but because who you are becomes more powerful than what you say. At the highest level of communication, your life becomes the message. Your energy, your presence, your consistency, your way of listening, your way of walking into a room, when aligned with your words, creates trust faster than any script can. Because people may doubt what you say, but they rarely doubt what you embody. That's the focus of this chapter. Not just to teach you how to speak smart, but how to become the kind of person whose communication feels real, trusted, and magnetic without needing to prove anything. Let's begin. Integrity is the foundation of influence. You can't fake character. You can impress people temporarily with style, but you earn long-term trust with substance. If your message says one thing but your actions say another, eventually people stop listening. Why? Because deep down, we all sense truth. We feel the gap between what someone says and who they are. Smart communicators close that gap. They live their message. They walk what they talk. And because of that, when they do speak, their words carry authority. Not forced authority, but earned authority. And that kind of influence can't be copied. It's built slowly, through consistency. Every time you honor your word, every time you choose courage over comfort, every time you live by your principles, even when no one's watching, you build that trust. And when people trust you, they follow you. Not because you're clever, but because you're clear. Energy speaks before words. Do you felt this before? Someone walks into a room and says nothing, yet you feel something. Calm, tension, warmth, confidence. Whatever it is, it's felt before they speak. That's energy. And energy is communication. More than body language, more than tone. It's the subtle frequency of your being. When you walk into a room with peace, you calm people. When you walk in with resentment, you tighten the space. You don't need to say a word. That's why managing your inner state is not just for you, it's for others. The more clear, compassionate, and grounded you are inside, the more effective you'll be even in silence. Great communicators don't just master words, they master their own energy. They check in with themselves before meetings. They ground themselves before difficult conversations. They breathe deeply before speaking on stage. Because they know words may come later, but energy arrives first. The smartest speakers are also the best listeners. To speak with power, you must listen with humility. The more deeply you listen, the more wisely you speak. Because listening teaches you two essential things: what really matters to the person in front of you. What's better left unsaid. In today's world, everyone wants to talk, to be heard, to be seen, but very few take the time to see others first. And yet, that's the shortcut to influence. When people feel seen, they open. And once they open, they receive your message more fully. So listen not just to respond. Listen to understand, to feel, to connect. And in doing so, you'll discover that the most powerful thing you say may be, "I hear you." That must be hard. "I'm with you." That's emotional intelligence. That's leadership. That's depth. Vulnerability is strength in disguise. Too many people try to sound perfect when they speak. They avoid flaws. They hide uncertainty. They rehearse every word. But in doing so, they create distance. Because people don't relate to perfect, they relate to real. When you share something honest, even messy, you invite people in. You don't lose respect, you gain it. Because people see themselves in your courage. You become relatable, approachable, memorable. Being a smart communicator doesn't mean having all the answers. It means having the courage to say, I don't know, but I care. I made a mistake, and I'm learning. Here's what I've been through, and here's what I've learned. Those sentences carry more power than any polished pitch because they're human, and humanity is magnetic. Consistency builds credibility. One powerful speech won't change your life, but consistent communication will. Not just on stage, in everyday moments, how you respond to criticism, how you treat waiters, how you speak to your team when no one's watching. Those moments are your brand. They communicate louder than your bio, and they build or break trust. So be consistent, not perfect, just honest, aligned. Say what you mean what you say, and do what you promise. That's not a communication trick. That's a life principle. And the more you live by it, the less you'll need to convince anyone of anything. They'll feel your alignment and trust you. That trust is the highest form of persuasion. Be the calm in the chaos. When things go wrong, when people are upset, when conflict arises, that's when true communicators shine. Not by being louder, but by being calmer. When you can hold your ground, breathe instead of react, offer clarity instead of drama, you become the anchor in the storm. And people gravitate to anchors. Because in chaos, the one who stays calm leads. So don't just master language. Master your nervous system. Practice presence. Build emotional resilience. Train yourself to pause before responding. That pause will often be the most powerful thing you say. Chapter 13. Strength in Stillness. The Power of Quiet Authority. Powerful people don't need to raise their voice. They don't need to dominate the room. They don't need to remind others of their power. Because true power doesn't come from display. It comes from presence. And that presence is rooted in quiet authority. This chapter is about that authority, not the kind built on loud speeches, control, or attention, but the kind that grows silently from who you are, how you live, and how you carry yourself. Let's begin. Authority versus aggression. Too often, people confuse assertiveness with aggression. They think being heard means being loud. They think power lies in overpowering others. But here's the truth. Real authority is calm. It doesn't need noise. It doesn't need performance. In fact, the more inner authority you develop, the less external force you need. When you know who you are, when you trust your values, when you're deeply aligned with your truth, you stop chasing validation. You stop trying to control conversations. You start leading through presence. And people feel that. They trust it. They follow it. Not because you shout, but because you speak from stillness. The calm voice wins long term. Think of the last time someone really got your attention. Not because they were dramatic, not because they had flair, but because they spoke from depth, with composure. They looked you in the eye. They didn't flinch under pressure. They didn't rush. They just held their ground. And that grounded energy made their words land. That's what calm communication does. It cuts through noise. It bypasses defensiveness. It disarms tension. In conflict, in business, in leadership, calm wins. It doesn't win immediately, but it wins sustainably because it builds trust. And trust is the most valuable currency in communication. Stillness comes from inner clarity. You can't fake calm for long. If your inner world is chaotic, it shows in your voice. It shows in your face. It leaks into your words. Stillness comes from knowing your values, knowing your worth, knowing your truth. It comes from slowing down internally so you can speak clearly externally. Before every powerful conversation, ask yourself, what do I truly stand for here? Am I here to protect my ego or to serve truth? Do I want to win or do I want to connect? That clarity resets your nervous system, and from that space, you speak differently. You speak not to impress, but to express. You speak not to dominate, but to contribute. That shift changes everything. The power of grounded boundaries. Quiet authority doesn't mean being passive. It means being rooted. So when you set boundaries, you do so without anger. You don't scream, no. You simply say, that doesn't work for me. Here's what I need. I respect you, but I also respect myself. No threats, no guilt trips, just clarity. Boundaries set from calmness are often more respected than boundaries set with drama, because they come from strength, not from reactivity. When people feel that you're not trying to hurt them, only protect your values, they listen. That's how influence grows. Not through intimidation, but through grounded self-respect. Silence is not weakness. Smart communicators know the value of silence. They know when to pause, when to let a sentence breathe, when to let a question hang. They don't fear silence, they use it. Because silence, when intentional, creates depth. It invites reflection. It creates suspense. It signals confidence. People who rush to fill silence usually speak from insecurity. People who embrace silence speak from certainty. So next time you're tempted to fill the gap, wait. Let your last sentence echo. Let your stillness speak. Let your presence hold the space. Often, that's more powerful than the next line. Respect is gained, not demanded. Aggressive communicators often demand respect. They use status. They use fear. They use volume. But respect that's demanded is rarely genuine. It may work short term, but in the long run, it fades. True respect is earned by how you show up, by how you treat others, by how you handle pressure. You gain respect when people see that. You don't break under stress. You don't betray your values. You don't pretend to be someone else to fit in. That quiet consistency builds a reputation stronger than any speech. People begin to say they don't talk much, but when they do, I listen. They never force their ideas, but somehow I always trust them. They carry weight without trying to. That's quiet authority. It's rare, but it's magnetic. Lead without needing to lead. One of the highest levels of communication is when people follow your lead without you trying to lead. You don't give instructions. You don't need attention. You simply embody the energy others want to feel. When you stay composed, others settle. When you stay kind, others soften. When you stay true, others align. That's leadership, not in position, but in presence. You don't need a title. You don't need applause. You just need to stay aligned, quietly, steadily. And in that alignment, your voice becomes one of influence, not because you speak the most, but because your words carry inner authority. Chapter 14. Let your results speak. When action becomes the loudest voice. Some of the most powerful communicators barely speak. They don't need to, because their life speaks louder than any words ever could. Their discipline says more than their declarations. Their consistency speaks more than their charisma. Their outcomes command more respect than their opinions. This is the power of embodied communication, where you no longer have to say you're smart, people feel it. Where you no longer have to convince, your results already did. That's what this chapter is about. Becoming the kind of communicator whose life is so aligned, so sharp, and so focused that you don't need to announce it. You don't need the spotlight, because the light you carry within is enough. Let's break it down. The most convincing voice is evidence. We live in a world full of opinions. Advice is everywhere, but what we truly listen to are results. Not motivational quotes, not fancy words, but real, undeniable results. When someone speaks after doing the work, we lean in, because it's not theory. It's experience. You can feel it in their voice, not louder, but heavier, not more dramatic, but more grounded. Their silence carries weight because they've walked through the fire. And when they speak, it's not about impressing anyone. It's about serving from lived truth. That's the difference. Smart communicators don't chase applause. They chase alignment. They chase doing, not just saying. And because of that, their voice holds authority without having to prove anything. Discipline is the most underrated communication tool. Want to speak with power? Start by showing up every day, quietly, faithfully. Discipline builds credibility, and credibility builds communication weight. People may not compliment your effort, they may not always recognize your grind, but they feel your consistency. And over time, your presence becomes trustworthy, not because of your charisma, but because of your reliability. You say less, but every word counts more, because behind each sentence is 1,000 silent repetitions, 1,000 small wins, 1,000 days of not giving up. That's what gives your voice depth, not just how you say it, but how much of your life backs it up. Talk less, prove more. There's a phrase that defines this chapter. When you're good at something, you tell people. When you're great at something, they tell each other. You don't need to go around announcing your greatness. Let your body of work do it. Let your consistency speak. Let your standards speak. Let your character speak. The person who always brags about being the smartest in the room rarely is. The one who says nothing but delivers owns the room. So, the next time you want to explain yourself, pause. Ask yourself, do I really need to talk here, or is this a moment to show? Because often, showing creates more impact than telling, and silence, when backed by excellence, becomes a language of power. The long game creates the loudest echo. You don't become respected overnight. True communicators play the long game. They speak with patience. They move with intention. They build reputations brick by brick. They don't chase viral moments. They build quiet legacy. That's why they're trusted, because they're not here for quick applause. They're here for quiet mastery, and that mastery reflects in how they speak. Clear, but never rushed, grounded, but never arrogant, warm, but never performative. You hear them, and you remember them. Not for how loud they were, but for how true they sounded. That truth, it's forged in long hours, in invisible work, in silence. The silence that creates strength. Let your environment reflect your values. Your words can be sharp. Your tone can be warm. But when people enter your space, what do they feel? Your habits, your systems, your lifestyle. That's also communication. The cleanliness of your room, the structure of your time, the people you allow around you. All of it sends a message. Smart communication doesn't just happen in conversations. It happens in what you tolerate, what you allow, what you model. So refine your environment. Let your desk speak. Let your calendar speak. Let your silence speak. And soon, you'll find you've created a field of influence without even trying. Focus is the new flex. In an age of distractions, focus is rare. And anything rare automatically becomes powerful. When you stay focused, when you don't explain your every move, when you work in silence, you become mysterious. And mystery attracts attention, not in a manipulative way, but in a way that says they're building something real. And real always rises. So don't feel pressured to constantly update people. Let them wonder. Let them see results, not routines. Let them feel your momentum, not your to-do list. The most dangerous speaker is the one who's been quietly evolving. Because when they return, they don't ask for a seat. They bring their own table. Chapter 15. The Art of Saying Less. Mastering the Silence. Behind the words. By now, you've walked through a journey. You've learned to control your emotions. You've learned the psychology of connection. You've learned how to speak smart, with clarity, with calm, with confidence. But at the peak of all this learning lies one final truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Not because you're withholding, but because you've mastered the moment. This is where we end. Not with more strategies, but with the wisdom to know when to stop speaking and simply let truth breathe. Let's go deep one last time. Stillness is not the absence of power. It is power contained. A quiet mind is not an empty mind. It is a focused mind, a directed force, a storm under control. And in communication, this stillness becomes your most powerful asset. When everyone else is rushing to speak, the one who pauses, listens, observes, controls the room. Stillness isn't silence out of fear. It's silence out of strength. It's the space between your words that makes your message breathe. It's the deep inhale before the sharp response. It's the restraint that adds gravity to your truth. Once you taste this stillness, you never go back to noise, because you realize the less you say, the more meaning your words carry. Communication beyond language. True communication is not limited to voice. It lives in your body language, your tone, your breathing, your presence, even your absence. Sometimes not showing up for the drama is the message. Sometimes not responding to provocation is power. Sometimes walking away with dignity says everything. You don't need to argue to win. You don't need to speak to prove. When your inner clarity is strong, silence becomes your loudest language. And people feel it. They feel when someone is so centered, so focused, so aligned, that nothing external shakes them. That's unshakable communication. No mic needed. When your presence is the message, there's a level of growth where you don't need introductions. People feel your energy when you enter a space, not because of what you say, but because of how you are. They see the discipline in your posture. They hear the calm in your voice. They feel the boundaries without needing words. At that level, presence communicates. It whispers, "I've done the work. I don't need to impress. I'm here with intention." And this type of communication is rare, but it's unforgettable because it's not built in a week. It's built in the dark, in silent mornings, in unseen repetitions, in thousands of decisions made alone. When your life becomes that refined, your voice doesn't just speak, it transmits. Let silence create space for others. Smart speakers don't just speak well. They create space for others to unfold. They pause, they wait, they invite. Not every silence is a gap. Some silences are gifts, a moment to breathe, to reflect, to go deeper. The people who make you feel heard don't always speak much. They listen deeply. They respond mindfully. They honor your truth without hijacking the moment. That's emotional maturity. That's grace. That's real intelligence. And in your own communication journey, this is the final test. Can you stay silent when your ego wants attention? Can you hold space when your mind wants to fix? Can you receive instead of perform? If you can, you've mastered communication, not as a performer, but as a presence. Your life will echo, louder than any words. All the techniques in this book, the tone, the timing, the psychology, they matter. But ultimately, it's your life that will speak the loudest. Who you become will determine the impact of your words, your habits, your integrity, your alignment. Those things will shine through your voice. They'll shape your eyes when you speak. They'll sharpen your silence when you pause. They'll make you unforgettable, not because you tried to be, but because you lived with depth. So let this final message be simple. Live in a way that your words are just the confirmation, not the persuasion. Let your life become so steady, so rooted, so pure, that when you finally do speak, people don't just hear it, they feel it, and they believe it. Not because of how well you said it, but because of who you are. You don't need to be loud to be legendary. Let's close this journey where it truly ends. Not with fame, not with force, but with freedom. Freedom from the need to constantly prove. Freedom from the urge to always be seen. Freedom from performing, posturing, and pleasing. Because smart communication is not about performing, it's about connecting. It's not about who's the loudest in the room, but who's the clearest in the room. So be that person, the one who knows their worth, speaks with clarity, listens with compassion, acts with intention, and rests in silence, knowing they've said enough. If you've come this far, thank you. You didn't just listen to words. You walked through a transformation. You've sharpened your mind. You've centered your emotions. And you've elevated your voice, not in volume, but in value. Remember, the smartest communicators don't just talk well, they live well. So speak, pause, lead, and when necessary, let silence do the talking. Your voice matters. Use it wisely.